I think one of the issues that one has to deal with, that I alluded to, I really feel strongly about that in the clinical world of hepatology, there are things that are, of course, are being done therapeutically and is try to focus on new drugs and development and so forth. But there is this tendency to separate clinical from basic. And that's always treacherous. It's a two-edged sword. We see it in the programs, there's a clinical program and then there's a basic program. And different groups, hepatology, particularly under David's, the editorship is continuing to make strides to bring these two things together. But now you have different journals almost. There's a clinical hepatology and a research. And that's very unfortunate because there isn't the exchange of ideas that happens. Years ago, actually Irving gave a talk at a very honorific meeting in New York. I forgot the name of this, the Harvey Society, in which he spoke about the difference between clinical and basic. And it's always stuck in my mind. What he suggested was, it's not what tools you use, it's the question you're asking. And a question that may involve patients at a bedside can be as basic, or for that matter, something in a laboratory using the most advanced technology. I suppose you could say could be partially clinically or maybe irrelevant. But this idea of separating basic and clinical, the basis of technology, has limitations, and it contributes to a barrier. So maybe we could figure out ways of trying to rephrase some of these ideas, and that would influence the way things are taught, and maybe the way journals publish, and the way societies have programs, to not get into the world of separation, even though the languages are different. It's a real challenge.
To follow up on this, you mentioned that the clinical descriptions of cirrhosis are really old. I mean, they really go back 2,000 years, but certainly we have to find, well-documented clinical descriptions for more than 100 years. And just, in my own lifetime, I remember when I was training, NASH was obviously an emerging problem. And this is now 20 years later, and the best we can do is argue about whether we should give more or less vitamin E, because that's the status of our current therapy. And we heard from Alan that the challenges of both understanding and treating fibrosis, for which not just in the liver but in the body there's obviously no effective treatment available. So if you think about these big problems that we've actually known about for a while in its clinical description, and actually in a lot of the mechanisms that lead to it, where is that bridge that's missing? Why do we not have that? Why do we not? Because you can think about hypercholesterolemia. We've known about this for just as long, right? And we're really successful in treating it.
Yeah, but where did the treatment of hypercholesterolemia come from?
From understanding of lipid metabolism in the liver.
I mean, it came from the study of a young girl with a rare disease, which was an absence of an LDL receptor. And what Mike and Joe did at the NIH was to demonstrate that this receptor was absent, and ergo a receptor was needed in order to transfer cholesterol into the cell. And this was the dawn of receptor-mediated endocytosis, which they then fully explored and, of course, led to the Nobel Prize. But that's a very good example of something that happened that wasn't programmed. It was the study of a rare disease. And there is a tendency, particularly in, I think, more the political world today, to look at grants and look at titles and say, what does this have to do with Alzheimer's disease or something like that? And that's very unfortunate. And we don't do a very good job in trying to educate these people as to why that's important, and even in our own field. So I understand what you're saying about the ancient problems of liver, the challenge of regeneration, the replacement of liver transplantation by other means, controlling something about the cells or even cell transplantation. These are enormous challenges that touch on basic biologic mechanisms, which is what the young people supposedly are much more expert in, certainly than I am. I don't know about you folks, but I mean, that's the challenge to focus into. So I agree with you. Things have not advanced to any great extent. And it may be that the wonderful work we heard this morning, maybe some of that will have high relevance into developing things, but you can't predict it. And I would believe that you can't program it. It's not like building an automobile. There is a stage where you know enough, like with the hepatitis C, or with the HIV and the development of specific inhibitors. But you have to know enough, and we're not near that.
Well, one idea I think, this will be our last topic before we open up to questions, so think of your questions. One idea for bridge building anew is to add a third voice. And a lot of people have been talking about convergence of the physical sciences, and into the sort of medical biological axis. So be completely self-serving as an engineer. But I really actually think that engineers have a lot to offer some of these solutions, and maybe they can help build the bridges. They can work on delivery, they can make liver tissues, we can, I think there are many things that we can try to tie the communities together with a new kind of person.
But you gave two very good examples in your own comments. You met Charlie Rice, that was serendipity, and good things happened with hepatitis. I don't know how you got into the malaria, but it must have been something very similar along those lines. And the same thing with everybody's work. It doesn't happen by chance. If you'll pardon me a bit of nostalgia, when I was a medical student, I was going to quit after the second year because I was tired of sitting down and listening to endless lectures. And I was advised by a very dear friend who was long gone, Sam Seifter, whom I had met. He was a very excellent biochemist, later at Einstein too. And Sam said, you're in the wrong medical school. Maybe you should go to Boston. Do you know anybody there? And I had a friend who was at Harvard. And so I went up to visit him on the train. I was sitting next to a man. I thought he was an old man. He was probably about 50. And he saw me studying. And so we started this conversation. And the entire way, most of the way to Back Bay Station, he was asking me about myself, what I was interested in, what I studied, all the things that I felt I hadn't acquired in school. And that was probably my fault, whatever. It didn't happen. As we get into Back Bay, he advised me to go see Dr. Castle at the Boston City Hospital, because they had a program for taking students from other medical schools to come there. And so I thanked him immensely, and then I said, but who are you? Where is this guy? And he wrote his name down. I still have the piece of paper. And he said, look, let me know how it works out. So that was John Enders, who a few years later won the Nobel Prize for culturing polio virus, and of course he was at Children's. Well, serendipity. My life has been filled with serendipity, you know? I went to a seminar years ago at NIH and heard Ira Paston talk about multi-drug resistant genes. And they had all this stuff, and it was all in cancer cells. And I asked them, well, what about, are these things expressed in normal human tissue? And Ira said, well, we don't know. At NIH, it's not so easy to get fresh, normal human tissue. So I came back to Boston without killing anybody, collected a bunch of fresh, normal tissue, and went back to there. And we discovered that PGP, MDR1, was in the biochanolicus. Now that was a paradigm shift, because that was the first clue that there were ATP-dependent processes that pump things into the bile, and that led to the discovery of the 4 major ATPase transporter. That was all just out of conversation in a field that was far removed from anything I was working on. Years ago, Billy Rubin used to be, that was a hot topic, believe it or not. They had special sessions at the ASLD meetings. Well, it turned out that what we learned about Billy Rubin, it was interesting, helped out some, but it turned out to be rather fundamental because the processes involved in its uptake, its metabolism, and its secretion are the same processes that are involved with many drugs, hormones, metabolites. So it was opening the door of pharmacology, which led to a new world. And I think now that's perhaps more difficult in today's world, because if you're particularly in with all the big numbers and all, you have to know where you are. But all that I'm saying is that opportunity knocks to everybody.
You should pay attention.
Yeah, talk to people. I think one of the biggest problems we have is that folks walk around with their ears plugged. And you get on an airplane or a train and you talk to somebody, and they look as if you're accosting them.
John Anders that way.
But I mean, I really think that's, I tell my kids that, I tell the students that, talk to people. You go to the cafeteria at NIH and sit down next to somebody, talk to them. You're going to learn something, and they're going to learn something before you know, maybe something interesting happens. That's how you met Charlie Rice.
Well, we had a mediator.
It seems to me there's a tradition in symphony orchestras. When the conductor retires, he hands a baton to the new conductor. Well, I had that bright idea the day before yesterday, but it was too late to get to the local baton store, which was about 20 miles away. So therefore, I have 2 small batons for each of you, because I think that you have conducted and created a fantastic program, and it is so exciting, to hear, particularly like the presentations this morning, and I'm sure this afternoon. So now that you have your batons, go forth and do well.
Thank you. Well, thank you.